witnessing the Pope's visit to America at close quarters, both because I was a bishop and because I was part of the coverage for NBC News. So I was able to see close up just how rapturously the American people received the Pope, but also I think how impressed he was by his encounter with the American people. So it was a thrill just to be part of it at close quarters. A lot of images stay in my mind from the trip. I mean, the one of the Pope blessing and kissing the forehead of the 10-year-old kid with cerebral palsy and his parents, they're with him. Oh, I think of the 9/11 monument where the rabbi and the imam prayed together, with the Pope. I think of when he went to the grade school in New York, and he's working with the kids there, and one of the kids is showing the Pope kind of how to use the smart board, and these kind of wonderful, touching, very human moments stay in my mind. But what stays most in my mind, actually, from that trip was the Pope's address before Congress. And I'll tell you why. Go back to my very first assignment with NBC on this trip. Was the morning of the Pope's arrival, and I'm on the south lawn of the White House for the Today Show. And while I'm there on the platform waiting for the interview, I'm looking over at the stately obelisk of the Washington Monument. And my mind drifted back to the mid-19th century when that monument was going up. And heads of state from around the world had sent blocks of marble to contribute to it. Well, Pope Pius IX sent a block, as a generous act. Well, anti-Catholic mobs seized that block and they threw it in the Potomac River. Well, as is well known, that was hardly an egregious act. Rather, it partook of a very deeply felt and virulent anti-Catholicism that was present in our country from the mid-19th century, really up until the election of John Kennedy in 1960. So what struck me was, as I watched the Pope of Rome coming to the rostrum and addressing a joint meeting of Congress, and hearing the applause and cheers of the representatives and senators wash over him, I mean, I'll humbly confess it, I'm a pretty hung-up Irishman, but my eyes filled with tears as I watched that scene of America now welcoming the Pope of Rome. So that was astonishing enough. But then when the Pope opened his mouth and read the speech, I was even more astonished because, as is his wont, he didn't trade in generalities, but he got very particular. And he focused on these four great American figures that he thought spoke to our time. Namely, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, Dorothy Day, and Thomas Merton. Now, anyone who is familiar with my work, even in a superficial way, would know that all four of those figures are heroes of mine. I've got a picture of Lincoln in my office. I've been a fan of Lincoln since I read a biography of him when I was about 7. Martin Luther King, I've done a number of videos, written a number of articles on King. He's been a personal hero of mine for a long time. Just recently, not that many months ago, I was in Memphis, where he was killed, and I went to the site and found that very moving. Dorothy Day, in my Catholicism series, we have a major section on Dorothy Day, and I take her to be a very important figure for the church today. And Thomas Merton is one of the major reasons I'm a priest. Thomas Merton had a huge impact on me when I was a teenager. So as those four figures rolled off the Pope's tongue, I mean, I was just kind of flabbergasted. Well, if we had time, I'd look at all four of them and why they're so important. But given the scope of this little video, I'll look simply at Merton. The Pope certainly noticed Merton's openness to other religions. He's a man of dialogue and all that, and that's true. But I think what's most important, the Pope mentioned, is that Merton, as a contemplative monk, was someone who was open to the transcendent dimension of God. Someone who taught a lot of people, including me, how to be open to the reality of God. And see, that is the key to everything. Finally, to be a Catholic is to be someone who is preoccupied with God. Everything else follows from that. Why are we preoccupied with Jesus? Well, because he's God. Why do we care about the sacraments? Well, because they instantiate Jesus, who's God. Why do we worry about the church? Because the church is the mystical body of Jesus, who is God. I mean, God is everything. And here's the key. If you are closed to the dimension of God, as many people are today, that's the definition of secularism. You're closed off to God. then all you've got left to understand reality are categories such as the psychological, the interpersonal, or the political, right? When you've got only those categories, what happens is you look at the Catholic Church and its teachings, and you see it as just anomalous because it falls all over the place on the left-right spectrum. It confounds the left-right spectrum. Or you say, closed to change, open to change, progressive, traditional. Well, see, our teaching just confounds all that. The key to understanding it is bring God back into the picture. So, how can the church possibly be both, deeply opposed to abortion, but deeply for immigration reform? How can the church be passionately for protecting the environment and passionately for the free market? How can the church be radically opposed to the death penalty and completely supportive of the traditional family? Now, see, line up those issues, and it's left, right, left, right, left, right. And people, wring their hands and they pull their hair. How could this be? Well, yes, take God out of the picture. I agree. It becomes anomalous. Put God right back in the center of things. What do you find? That all people are beloved children of God who have equality and infinite dignity because of their relationship to God. Once you see that, then all these issues fall into place. The church is consistently pro-life, pro-individual, pro-person. Once you get that, then the church's teaching becomes completely coherent. That's why I think it was so important, not only that the Pope spoke before Congress, that in itself was astonishing, but that he spoke before Congress to these kind of, hard-boiled politicos. He spoke to them precisely of a monk, a Trappist monk, who urged openness to the dimension of God. That's the message we most need to hear today.